Hello, welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Ari Hirschberg, Community Practice Lead at the Exchange Lab. Today's conversation is on leadership attributes of a product owner. On July 6th, product owners from the natural resource sector, Matthew Hall and Jessica Wade, joined Jimmy Boyd, Chief Digital Officer of the Digital Platforms and Data Division, for the Digital Government Monthly Update Call, a 30-minute monthly live stream conversation with thought leaders from inside and outside of government. I really enjoyed hearing both of you and your thoughts on leadership attributes of a product owner during that live stream, and appreciate that both of you are taking the time to continue the conversation on the podcast. I think it was very valuable, and there was lots of feedback, and it's neat to take it to the next level. So welcome, Jessica and Matt. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
How can a product owner ensure funding for their app year over year? This was a popular question in the live stream, and your response, Matt, had a lot of Slido likes. So would you like to start on that one?
Well, again, there's not one right answer. And I heard from Jessica the same thing, that projects often start out with a cornucopia of funding sources, often sharing and borrowing from contributing ministries that might have an interest in those projects. There might be a mix of capital funding and operating funding, a mix of temporary assignments and auxiliaries and contractors. And it's not a neat and tidy thing to do. The traditional approach of putting in a business case for a capital project, we are finding is not the answer for agile teams, primarily because of what it says about the project. Capital is meant to be designed to handle assets that depreciate over time. And a software product in agile is meant to be built and maintained and continuously improved. So it goes completely contrary to the design principles for an agile team to be amortizing the value of their product right after they get to production. The other thing that doesn't really match up is getting to production. So you have a capital project that gives you, let's say $500,000, and after maybe 3 or 4 sprints, you've got a product that's in production, but you're not done. You've just released your first feature that you're looking to get feedback on. And so when do you start amortizing that asset if you really should? It doesn't really fit the model. And so the goal that I've been trying to promote is that we find a way to establish operational funding for agile teams. It's always a challenge when you have a new agile team that you have to find money to hire new FTEs and things. But when you have a agile team that's in place with a ministry that the leadership in that organization can ask to work on their highest priority problems, their highest priority digital solutions that need to be worked on, then those capital funding problems don't come into play as much. Because the ministry has decided to fund operationally an agile team to help continuously improve and maintain their digital systems for that portfolio or that file. In the case of our digital trust services groups, there is a appetite to have a permanently funded program for digital trust. And that is the direction that we want to move. For teams that are in that space where they're a new team starting up and trying to figure out how to fund their team year over year, I think, to summarize, my advice is to put the wheels in motion to make your team a operationally funded program within the ministry that you're working in, and you may need to prove your value in your ministry. You may have to prove that the ministry needs that team, that you're going to utilize that team well, and to do that, you have to prove value. You have to measure the value of the products that you're producing. You have to show return on investment. You have to show break even of the value of the team and break even of the products you're producing. But when you share those numbers at the executive tables, it's not hard for them to see that they do need to keep that team in place because they are making them money effectively.
Well, to me, that's exciting because why else are we working if we're not showing the value of what we're doing and to show that it should be going forward?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with Matt. And a lot of the products that my team manages, we actually started, I started on the team right when they were finishing up using their capital funding, and we started trying to get operational funding for a lot of the products. So we were doing exactly as you said, is we were pitching to executives and doing demos to the right people to make sure that they're seeing what we're doing and seeing the value in it. And then they can't not spend the money. They see what we're doing and they're like, okay, we need to keep this going. We need to stay involved. I think a challenge that can come up is, I think you mentioned across portfolios, having a digital team shared across a ministry portfolio. Our team has several different ministries. So collecting operational funding from several different ministries can be challenging, but can also be helpful because then each ministry doesn't have to spend quite as much operational money on it, and you can share the resource. The only issue then is making sure that you're prioritizing according to organizational, directives, and making sure that executives are speaking to each other so that you're prioritizing the right thing. So yeah, I think I totally agree with exactly what you said, Matt, is that funding these teams operationally makes a lot more sense than doing it with capital money. And then you really need to just make sure that you're showing the right people what you're doing and the value of what you're working on.
Nice. So with mature multi-year products, how do you keep a team interested? Jessica?
Yeah, it can be hard. I think our team, we're working on a product that has been around for quite a while, which is EPIC, EAO's Project Information Center. And I know a lot of people on the team have been working on that product for 4+ years. So I think to keep it interesting, we've onboarded additional products to kind of change things up a bit. We've utilized sharing code components, so making sure we're building things for EPIC, but that can be shared across different products, which I think kind of brings a little bit more interest to the team because they're seeing their work shared across different organizations and teams. I think the other thing is letting the team try new things and not being scared to try new things, solve new problems, making sure that the user research that's done is brought to the team to try to solve the problem instead of brought to the business to try to solve the problem. Because I think that really keeps teams interested is when they're involved in the problem-solving process and they can use new technology or work with different people to solve interesting problems.
It also makes us easier to hire.
Yes, yeah. And it makes work a lot more fun.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think another thing that you've done on your to keep people interested is position your team across multiple ministries. Mm-hmm. One thing that I was thinking about in terms of, when you talk about a portfolio doesn't have to align to one ministry. And, that's just coincidence that it does because of how the Premier has divided up the responsibilities amongst the ministers that are in place. But these portfolios, they make sense independent of the way that those responsibilities are divided up. And so establishing a product team that manages a portfolio of solutions, of digital services, probably shouldn't line up to a ministry.
That's really interesting.
Like, the odds are, if you actually look at what government is doing across the board and think about, what your product can actually do, more times than not, I see the products that people are building have application across multiple ministries. Think of permitting. Permitting is not a mining thing. It is very much broadly across all of government. Think of certifications or training or any other types of services that we work on. And so, if you're on a team that you feel has value to contribute across government, I would encourage you to think about your product as a government product and start reaching out to the other teams that are working on those things and find ways to make your product a government-wide service instead of a ministry service.
So you've articulately explained government as a platform in the BC government.
Luckily, I didn't mean to.
Well, I've never heard anyone actually put the pieces together in the government. This one.
I've just thought about it from a couple little spots where I've been in, right? Like I worked on a common services team, and that one was easy, right? Because we were, building things that were specifically meant to be shared across government. But my current project, where we're called the Mines Digital Trust team, we were asked to work on something for responsible sourcing, finding a solution that'll help us prove that things are resourced from a responsible source. And what I found as we started to develop the product is, this thing has application for like educational diplomas. It has application for government doing information sharing agreements with each other. So like internal and external services that we could use this for. And, I've really been trying to position it or, just test those ideas across these different government areas to see if that actually makes sense. And I'm hoping that when we take this product forward, that we will find a way to allow anyone in any ministry to utilize the service. And Mines will get a pat on the back for kicking it off, but they'll end up just being one of the many users that continue to benefit from it.
Yeah, to me, working in this way in Agile and working in the open, that's one of the most exciting parts. Is like we're not making people create the wheel over and over and over again. We go into something and we see things like you've seen from creating different things where that wheel can be put into different places and just easily added.
Yeah. I think that also speaks to open data. I was thinking as you were talking is instead of just one ministry holding all the mining data, I think a lot of different ministries would benefit from using and seeing that data. And so having cross ministry portfolios would help with that, and having open data and shared data between ministries and between different groups. We have an application that's exactly that. It basically consolidates data and makes it open to the public to see, and it's from across the natural resource sector. And it actually serves several different ministries' front-end websites. So it's exactly what you were describing is kind of one product that's serving several different ministries.
And are you tracking the conversations and the interest in all in the open data that you're sharing?
Yeah, and it's different between websites and what people are accessing. But yeah, it's people love data and love seeing it, and like when it's open and when you can download it yourself. So we've tried. It's sometimes hard to consume it from all the different sources across government. That's been our biggest hurdle. But once we make it available, people get really excited. And once you can analyze it and put it into charts or graphs and kind of show summaries of the data, that's when people get really excited.
Yeah, because that's when it makes sense.
Yeah, that's when it's useful. Exactly, yeah.
So how do you build user-centric products if you have that barrier?
The barrier of the
Keeping people interested.
of keeping people interested. Yeah. I think it's really just important to keep talking to the users when you can, like making sure that I work with a user researcher and she's talking to people every day. And not just her, I'm talking to people every day. And I'm making sure that my product team is in contact with subject matter experts or people using the application. So when they're working on a particular component, instead of coming directly to me to say, oh, like, should this drop down have these 3 fields? It's more so they'd go to a subject matter expert or a user and say, hey, would you want to see this? Like, I can build this in whatever way you want to see it. So I think that helps keep people interested in it and makes it user-centric because they're talking directly to the user and not necessarily going through a third party all the time.
Yeah, it's nice to see users be actually excited to use a finished product.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes users are excited to see a product in test or like in the middle before it's finished because they get a chance to kind of influence what it's going to look like. Mm-hmm.
I had a long conversation today with the 2 policy analysts that are working on my team about the different mentalities about openness and transparency in development of various solutions, including new policies, and how one mindset is that we need to make sure that we don't set false expectations or let the cat out of the bag and before we've really decided whether we're going to do that or not. There are a lot of sensitive issues, of course, that where it makes sense to, let's have some inside conversations before we go out to the public. But one of the things that I think you hit on there is how being able to talk to the end user on a regular basis helps to keep the team excited and engaged, and it stimulates innovation in the public service. The other approach where we are working kind of in a closed off group where we can't talk about certain things until executive have approved that policy to be moved forward or after it's gone up to cabinet to make decisions about certain things. The process, it's not as exciting for the individuals who are working on the actual product to have to wait for things to go up the chain and down the chain to be able to then say, okay, now we're ready to make an announcement about a new service or a new policy that's going to come into play. So, as we look at our program delivery across government and we are thinking about how do I create a team that is excited to deliver these things, that's one of the mindsets that you might want to consider in terms of how can I, as soon as possible, allow my team to reach out and talk to actual people who are going to be affected by the thing that we're just starting to consider. And what's the harm in allowing people to be involved, as you said, in a half-baked solution, in an idea that's just forming? Like, it's a public service, right? They're part of this. So why not involve them in the policy that's being considered? Why not involve them in early conversations about things? We're going to hear some criticism, and we're going to have some people yelling at us, and we're going to have very conflicting views on certain topics from parties that want one thing that's in opposition to another. That's going to happen, but that's part of the whole thing, right?
I don't know about you both, but I would rather whatever I'm doing know in the beginning. I always want to know in the beginning. If what I'm doing sucks, please tell me, and then tell me all along the way. But at least in the beginning, it's not the end in getting that. Mm-hmm. Like you're building a relationship.
Yeah.
So how do you define value?
Well, I think you have to have a clear understanding of the problem. That's why I think it's so important to have good UX researchers and good policy analysts that are supporting your product development, so that they can help you really understand the intricacies of the problem that you're facing. The more clearly you understand the problem, the easier it's going to be to define what success looks like. And once you've defined what success looks like, then you can ask yourself the question, okay, what is the one thing that if this happens, we can say that we have succeeded? And then you can start to measure the occurrences of that successful event happening. So defining the metric of success. But you can't just pick a metric without understanding what success looks like, and you can't know what success looks like if you don't really understand the problem. So that's effectively how I would get to value.
Yeah, I really like that approach. And I think it's a tricky question because there's qualitative measures and quantitative measures, and some are a lot easier to measure, like dollars saved or time saved are usually go-tos for providing value. But I think there's a lot of importance placed also on like public perception or people's feelings, especially for a lot of these public services that we're providing. If somebody's visiting a website that they're supposed to get information from and they're finding it frustrating or really difficult to navigate, I think that's an important measurement tool to use. If you can improve that website and they go to it another time and they're feeling happy and they found what they're looking for, that's providing value, I think, to the public, and that's what we want to do. So I think I like your approach of you need to understand the problem first and then come around and figure out what your metrics are and what value is. And I think it's just important to not miss those smaller pieces, the feelings and the perceptions.
One of the things that I laughed at after realizing what we had been doing for so many years, occasionally our branch would get together and we would ask for kind of successes or report outs on things. And a lot of times people would thank each other for going the extra mile. And there was a number of people that all got together, did some overtime, and got a product into production and released it. And then they were all thanking each other for that effort. And, thinking about that approach of trying to measure, that's one way of looking at value. The other way is where you could report out. So our product went to production, and we were talking with Jay, who is one of our users, and he told us a story about how, by being able to log in and see his past health records and the prescriptions that he's been on for the past 20 years, that he realized that, some things and some information about his history that has helped change his life. Can you feel the difference?
Mm-hmm.
Right to the heart.
Yeah.
Right? And my wife opened up the Health Gateway app the other day, and she saw all this stuff and she was blown away. And I told her, you need to go onto the website and tell them how you feel so that they can have that response. And she did, and I hope that they felt the value that they're delivering to the actual people out there that matter. Mm-hmm. It's not about us as a team member. Like, the value's out there with the people who we're trying to serve.
Mm-hmm. I think that too kind of comes right back to your other question of when a development team sees people getting that much value and having that much faith in a system, that provides them a lot more interest in working on it, because they're like, wow, what I'm doing is important and people are finding it really valuable. So it kind of comes full circle back to your previous question.
You're not behind this wall where you're just pushing things out and not knowing how it hits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're seeing it. And if you hear that feedback, so once if a user says that, I think it's important to share it to the team, because they're like, wow, look, I helped accomplish that and helped change this person's life, which is kind of neat. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I loved being able to see when I got my COVID email, said my appointment's ready, knowing that I helped build the component that was used to send those emails.
Yeah.
And that the Health Gateway team was able to benefit from the component that they built. Like those are the little things that really matter to the team members. Like they could see, like this is something that I was able to do to help send out millions of emails to get people in to get their shot. Like that was really valuable to my team and to me.
Mm-hmm.
How have you been able to integrate GVA Plus into your products?
On our previous team, we did have a small interaction where we were able to make sure that our question on gender had the appropriate options for responding. Again, it is a new topic, and products might just touch on it in a few different areas. One of our policy analysts does have an eye to that topic and is cognizant of the need for integrating those factors into the design of the solution and making sure that we have accessibility out to that segment of need.
Thanks. And what are the most difficult aspects of the job? It's a good question, right?
I don't know what.
Yeah,
what is the thing you get asked the most from your team?
Ooh, honestly, probably one of the most difficult things can be resourcing. Like I know teams change and the composition changes and the people change, which is totally fine. It's just that it's hard to find resources sometimes, and it ends up being a lot of onus on sometimes a product owner to do a lot of HR work. And I find that part difficult just because it can be distracting from other pieces of our work. And it's nice once you have like a really stable team that's kind of all together. I find that's when you're performing, right? You're really building stuff and working well together and jiving. But when you lose resources or things shift, I think that can be difficult. And I think, maybe that's just something I've been dealing with recently as well. So it's kind of fresh in my brain. That's one thing. And also, I think the other thing that I could think of is making sure we have stable funding for like a full year and beyond. I think that's something, and I mean, we already talked about it, but just it's difficult when you have, say, 3/4 of your year funded, and then you're kind of spending a lot of your time being like, okay, I still have like 4 more months or 3 more months I need to make sure we have money for. So, and then you spend a lot of time doing that as well.
I'd agree. Those are probably the two of the hardest pieces of the job. However, it's not always the case that the product owner gets tagged with those things.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I've been on a couple teams where I had someone that had those things kind of handled for me, right? So I had people, and I had funding, and I could just do the pure product owner stuff, and not so much on the resource management and funding piece. And yeah, that allowed us to be more performing on a regular basis and things. If I think about the hardest part of the specific product owner pieces, it's around when the team says, so what are we doing in the next 3 months? What's like, they're not sure what the vision is. And, that's the nature of Agile is you have a clear idea of what's happening this sprint, and you have a rough idea for the following, and then it gets less and less clear out to like a 3-month time frame. And beyond 3 months to 6 months, it gets really foggy because you haven't really gathered that feedback yet, and you're not sure about those hypotheses, if they're even valid questions or problems to ask. The research is still coming in to understand those problems. And so this idea of having to constantly be reworking the roadmap so that your team has a clear concept that they're trying to shoot for, that abstract concept that they have to materialize in actual code and wireframes and UX research plans and all of that. And as a product owner, that's the question that I get asked a lot. And maybe I'm just terrible at it.
I think that's tough. Yeah.
It's I certainly am trying to experiment with ways of helping my team know where they're going and what the vision is, and I'm not sure if there's some other ideas out there that someone, if you want to reach out to me and let me know if you've solved that would be great.
Yeah, that's a really good one. We struggle with that too. And you want to be the person there to be like consoling and be like, don't worry, we have a plan beyond 3 months. Like I've got it figured out, but that's very rarely the case that it's completely figured out 3 months in the future. I find that difficult as well. Mm-hmm.
So do either of you have any final thoughts for today? Anything that came up that you want to come back to, or just any thoughts in this work?
There was a couple topics around risk that came up. When we were talking about the whole point of capital funding and the way that agile teams manage risk versus traditional projects and how they manage risk, and the reason why we are more hesitant to hire full-time employees versus hiring contractors. There's a lot of topics around risk that come up as that affect agile teams. The most significant of those, I think, is the idea that an agile team, the idea that a team that is building a digital solution needs to be governed, and that their risk needs to be assessed and mitigated. And this fear of them producing something that isn't going to be valuable, and the idea that is needed is based on ideas that really shouldn't have a place if the agile team is functioning in a healthy way. So if I am producing value on a frequent basis, and if I am delivering something to production that's making a difference to somebody's life on a regular basis, then the value and the risk can be observed, and the trust in the team can be built on layer. And instead of needing to put in all of these risk mitigation tactics, you just continually build trust and get feedback and respond to that feedback and continuously improve the product.
That's great. Thank you both for your time. I really appreciate having you here, and I look forward to putting this out. If you have any questions or thoughts about the podcast, email me at re.hirschberg@gov.bc.ca. I would love to hear your feedback, comments, and suggestions. Thanks for listening.